Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my build, the Crab Lord, or that's what I'm going by at least. It is built around the new helmet, the Wraith Lord. I wanted to make a cool Spectre build around Wraith Lord. I usually do about one minion build per league, and this was my attempt this league. I have some interesting mechanics I want to go over with you, but the idea is pretty simple. Put on this helmet, get a bunch of extra Spectres. Spectres are the only minions we can have. Then it's going to be choosing what Spectre we want to use. I ended up going for these crab guys because they're pretty cool looking, they have some cool attacks, and most importantly, they have base fizz to cold conversion attacks, which allows me to do these gloves here. Because I wanted to build into this weird idea of doing a hybrid aura bot, aura stacker / minion build. And normally, if you're going for a fizz to cold conversion, you'd have to use the gloves that give up to 100% fizz to cold conversion for your minions. But since these minions already have their damage 75% conversion, I felt like that's close enough, and I put on these gloves. What these gloves allow me to do is, essentially, they give 40 aura effect to my links, and I am linking to my minions. So they give 40 aura effect there, and not only that, they allow my auras to be supported with generosity, which gives me another 44 aura effect. There is the mechanic here, which is the link targets count. Not that one. The non-curse auras from your skills only apply to you and link targets. Now, this is not 100% a bug or not a bug. I'm not 100% sure. It's either A, it is an absolute and it's overriding the generosity's ability to support, to affect you as well, or B, it's a bug. It's either one of those. I'm not sure which one it is. I'd probably go 60% it's a bug, 40% I don't think it's a bug. I'm not really sure. And the fact they haven't patched it means maybe it's meant to be working the way it's supposed to be working, because I feel like that's a pretty easy probably thing to fix. Maybe it's not, I don't really know. But the idea is these gloves allow us to have 40 aura effect from the gloves themselves and another 44 whenever we can put generosity on our auras. Now specifically this goes to our haste, it goes to our hatred, and it goes to our discipline. That allows us to have some pretty good ES. You'll notice here when I link these guys, I actually go up 1k ES because number one is I get a little bit of extra aura effect from generosity on our discipline, and number two is this cluster right here gives some increased ES when I have linked to 4 targets, which I have 8 guys I'm linking to, hence the 8k ES when I'm actually like mapping and playing the character. All right, now getting into the specifics of the character, the idea or the concept of it. One of my favorite things I'm doing is I'm using the new Parandus Pact Jewel. This thing is insane for Scion characters especially, but it's good for some other characters depending on your tree location. Essentially what this allows us to do is putting this jewel here gives us 3% ES on every single node in this radius, which is about 18 or something nodes, which is about 50% ES. And then I also could put an unnatural instinct here and get another like 50% ES, which between this stuff, between the Parandus Pack, this node, and then this cluster here, which gives 25% ES, I don't have much ES on my tree at all. I basically just have like this cluster here and this cluster, and that's basically it. And we could still hit a really competitive 8,000 ES with just essentially a high ES Val Regalia with not too much ES on our gear elsewhere. Granted, Wraith Lord has a little bit of ES, but you get the idea is what I'm talking about. Is we hit a pretty good ES number without really having to invest too much into ES. Most of the rest of our tree is invested into either A, aura stuff, which helps out our damage, or B, a little bit of minion nodes, like, for example, I grabbed Indomitable Army. I think that's an important node for the survivability of minions. And then also I went to a lot of clusters just for minion damage scaling, mainly because there's not a lot of sources of minion damage, and that's how we did that. I also did fit in Lucky Suppress with about 57 Suppress, which I think is somewhere in the range of 80 to 90% effective Suppress. And then on top of that, when we have our auras and our flasks on, which we always do, we have 1k regen, and then every 4 seconds we get a burst of 6k regen or whatever from the Guardian Ascendancy on the Ascendancy of Scion. So if you're wondering why did I choose Scion over Necromancer, the big reason is defenses. Necromancer obviously has the same offensive capabilities of the Offering, as well as it gives a little bit more speed per aura, but what it doesn't give is it doesn't give me an easy way to get a really tanky character. With this tree star I can get a lot of ES, and then with Guardian I can get a lot of sustain, and it just works out pretty well. And on top of all of that, because we have some pretty high scaling auras, you'll notice we also have 40,000 plus evasion, and we have ghost dance at our character. So I like this package setup because our character is pretty tanky. The one thing I'd say in terms of squishiness in this build isn't even our character. The weakest link for our character defensively is actually, unfortunately, our Spectres. I'm not a very avid Minion player, so most likely my my suspicion is I probably should have invested more into the tankiness other than this cluster. I basically did this cluster, I did the Minion life side of this wheel, and I did, for example, Renewal, and I did Feasting Fiends. Ultimately, my main assumption here is I probably should have gone a bit more tanky on the Minions. For the most part, this doesn't matter. All the way up to T16s, you'll never even notice. But when you will notice it is when you go into T17s and Ubers, and then you start to get punished because your Spectres start to die, in which case the play might be to drop, for example, Awaken Mini damage. It's a very good damage support, but for example, if I drop this for Meat Shield, right there with that alone, I would like double the effective HP or effective defenses of my minions. I'd lose a little bit of damage, like 20% or whatever it is. But I don't know, we might have to look into something like that in terms of survivability when you go into those harder boss fights, because when I played this character, I was getting PK due to my Spectre dying in the harder Uber fights. Like, for example, the Maven would use the standstill laser, and that would basically turn off all my minions' recovery. I didn't even know that applied to them as well, which made it a lot harder to fight, because not only did I have to dodge the standstill, but I had to convocate, and I'd have to save my convocate to use it at the correct time, so there were some dangerous things there. But outside of that, I mean, we were able to do, I think I did 5 out of 7 Ubers. I failed Exarch because I couldn't do the ball phase to save my life. Something about minions blowing up the balls when you're not near them and then getting shotgunned by it makes it kind of hard. And then I failed, what's the other fight I failed? Oh, I failed a Cortex. I had the worst mods I've ever seen on Cortex in terms of, like, I had a 5 mod Cortex and they were all really bad. It was like Pen, Gain is Extra, Speed, Frenzy, I don't know. Or no, it was Reduced Crit, which is like an 80% damage reduction for my character or something. So there were some really bad ones. Anyways, I'm pretty sure we would have done the Cortex fine if it was like an average level Cortex, but it was a ungodly Cortex. All right, let's get into some more mechanics. So we scale a bunch of Aura Effect. That gives us Hatred, which gives us damage for our minions. It gives us Haste, which makes our minions attack faster, but also makes our character feel better in terms of our overall movement speed, with the character having a high effect aura on our Haste. We also have a high effect Grace, which is that's defensive, and then we mix in a high effect Vitality with Precision with Clarity. Now, I will say this, depending on what level of character you are, in the early game, you might need to grab Purity of the Flesh and Written in Blood. As you're leveling the character up, you might not have enough life to reserve high levels of these auras. I'd recommend grabbing those nodes temporarily and then speccing out of them later. For example, right now we have ES investment here. You could just trade these 4 nodes for those nodes with life on them that do come with ES, because that life gives you the reservation space for Vitality, Precision, and Clarity. Now, why are these auras important? Number 1 is, for a Link skill, you need to have a lot of mana gen. Link skill, you'll see this costs 24 mana per second, and that is per Link target. So if I have 8 of these, I have to regen over, essentially, about close to 200 mana regen per second is what I need to sustain this. Now, I can sustain that perfectly because I have 380 mana regen. What are my mana regen sources? There essentially is, I have 1 mana regen on 1 item, right here, 60% mana regen, and then I have a very high level Clarity with a bunch of aura effect. Number 2, Vitality. That's how we get a lot of our base sustain on our character. That's how we have a lot of our base regen. Feels very good. And number 3, Precision. This gives over like 2k base accuracy. I forget how much aura effect I have on it, but basically it almost accuracy caps our minions by itself, and that's why we have that. But not only that, is it gives crit chance to specifically me. Technically, it's giving crit chance to the minions, but where it matters, where it's giving crit chance to me, is because I'm using Destructive Link. This skill bases my crit chance, which is 86.58. It puts my base crit onto my minions for their attack skills, or whoever I'm linking for their attack base skill, which allows me to have a 1 wand with a high base crit. You need to have this in your main hand. For example, if I were to swap these, I regret everything. I forgot that when I unequip this, I go below my strength number. You see this? You see this? This is why we can't have nice things. So I just... Ah! Alright, let me reset them. Okay, I'll reset them, it's fine. But anyways, for sake of demonstration, you'll see now my base crit is 65 because this wand only has 7 base crit. The important thing is the main hand needs to be over here, and that's what you're giving. That's what affects the base crit you're giving to your allies. And I'm gonna swap it back. Anyways, hopefully that showcased that pretty well in terms of your main hand. You need some good base crit on, and then we mix that good base crit from that with precision. So this is our crit chance we're getting from precision. We are also getting crit chance from Grand Spectrum crit chance for Grand Spectrums, which these are some of the cheaper ones, along with a Grand Spectrum for, if I can find it, I'm not blind, or power charges. So between our 3 power charges, 150 crit chance, we have 75 crit here, 75 crit here. We have 100 plus crit chance here. And then we also have Tech Rod's Graze. This gives 40% crit chance per jewel, per Murderous Eye. And essentially what happens if I wear 2 Tech Rods, I'm getting 80% crit chance from each, which allows for another 160% crit chance there. And all in all, when you combine all those things, you end up with Diamond Flask as well. You end up with a very high crit chance you're giving to your minions. Minions are typically very hard to get good crit on, and this allows us to do that. Outside of that, I am also using a Storm Shroud, and I'm using an Avoid Corruption on my Tech Rods, which you can also have on any one of your Abyssal Jewels. 1 Avoid Shock plus an Elevated Shock mod on your boots, and you are ailment immune. So that's another thing we have on this character. I am also using what I'd recommend the tech if you're going to craft these boots is if you have you need at least 1 pair that's magic, whether it's the Avoid Shock or the Raise Spectre. Well, 1 magic pair elevated, and then once you have your other elevated pair, I would recommend doing the Beast Hinekora Lock recipe before you go to combine them, and that allows you to not have to re-get the second elevated pair, because previously you would just imprint, you'd slam them together, and when it missed, you'd re-unimprint, and then you'd go get your other elevated mod again. You don't have to do that if you do the Hinekora Lock. You can check it. If it doesn't work, Bless Orbit or whatever, redo the Hinekora Lock Beast recipe, and then check again. That allows you to make pretty reliably good boots. So that's how we crafted these. And then on top of all of that, we are also using a Brew Restraint here, mainly just for aura effect on these 2 nodes. Ultimately, before I went to Suppress, if you were feeling tanky enough without it, you could go a pathing this direction, and that would allow you to maybe do Grave Intentions if you want to go a little bit more tanky on your minions, stuff like that. But this, I believe, is much stronger defensively for our character in terms of the Suppress. Granted, right now, our weakest link for survivability isn't our character at all. It's our minions. Our character is Omega tanky, so maybe it would be worth it to make the minions a little bit tankier and forgo some of the player defense. On top of all that, I will mention we are using Tides of Time to get permanent uptime on our flasks. So we have either reduced charges used or increased charge recovery. And then we have a bunch of flask duration tattooed on our tree. I think I have about 7 of these or 6 of these to allow for good uptime on these flasks. They don't last permanently forever, but for example, they will last, I don't know, a minute plus, most of them will. And what that means is during any boss fight, we are generating some charges, and those charges will offset the charges we are net losing, thus resulting in a permanent uptime. You just have to make sure you use the reuse at the end of this flask mod, and then turn them on at the start of each zone. It's something that you will get into mental memory pretty quickly. Outside of that, the Diamond Flask Quicksilver, we can't sustain those perfectly, so I just use those with use when full and let them automate themselves as they come up. All right. Hopefully I've explained this character semi-well. Let's go ahead and get into a map real quick. Showcase what the build looks like doing a rewritten, synthesized memory, whatever this is. I will say I've had a lot of fun with this character. It's super chill to play in terms of like I can just turn off my brain, walk around and do whatever. The main thing you are doing while you play this character is essentially every now and then you're convocating, and then you're just holding down the link button for a little bit. You only need about 0.8 seconds to cast the link skill 4 times, which is how many times you need to cast it to link everybody. The link skill auto targets. You don't have to think about where you're aiming. I'm mainly just running around, and then when I convocate, I just hold down the button a little bit. I'm not really specifically targeting any one of these guys. I map with melee splash. Like right now I have melee splash in, but if you were doing single target, you could put in multi-strike. I think for the most part, the melee splash is plenty of damage for the content. Like for example, this is a T16 level boss. We're still shredding the boss very, very quickly. But when you start going into something like if you want to do Ubers, you want to do some of that harder content, you can push the DPS up by putting multi-strike instead of melee splashes. Melee splash is mainly just a clear jewel to make the minions feel a bit better when you're walking around the map and you're just trying to go around looting corpses, picking up whatever. I will say this character's been very good in that regard, where I just haven't had to really think too much about what I'm doing. It's basically just they crush everything, and then I've been just kind of chilling. I've been relaxing. I'm not a big minion guy, so it's not always the playstyle I like, but I do enjoy doing it about once per league, and I had a lot of fun with these crab boys. Even though during the Ubers it was a bit rough, because if they died, I die. That's part of the downside of playing a link skill and stuff. But regardless of that experience, I still enjoyed them overall quite a bit in terms of power. Now let's talk in terms of how do you craft this gear if you want to replicate this character. Now, I already went over, if you're doing the boots, you need to get one elevated pair magic, which you can do that by essentially you elevate a mod, and then you can do a suffixes can't be changed, and you can do a scour. So if you have like +2 raise gem, suffix can't be changed, no 2 more suffixes, you can scour. That will make it a magic item. That is how you do that. You can get that way. You can get there by annulling off extra mods and doing Maven orbs and stuff, but that's the idea to get a magic pair. But essentially you hit a core lock and go for the combine. Once you check it, if it has a good suffix and maybe good prefixes or whatever you look for, either look for a decent outcome in terms of an okay suffix with some decent prefixes, which is what I went for, or you could just keep doing it until you see just like the perfect suffix type of thing. That's up to you. Outside of that, for the other gear pieces, I went for fractured minion damage. I actually regret this quite a bit, because it was so much extra money to get the fracture on these minion damage front set rings, and it's only 60% damage. It's probably not really worth it. I would have rather just gone and bought something off trade and saved myself a lot of money and a lot of time just getting some decent unsets with. We need at least 1 ring, I think, with Dex on it, and then outside of that, getting Int is good, getting 1 ring with mana regen is good, getting yourself some resistance is a good idea, and then, of course, a little bit of reduced cost isn't half bad for the link skill cost, or getting yourself some mana regen, ES, stuff like that. These rings, ultimately, I'm not too proud of, but that's neither here nor there. As for the chest piece, I'd recommend either A, just buy one off trade. This chest piece right here cost me 3 divines, and then I spent about 20 divines getting perfect Eldritch Implicits. What I'd recommend is spend 3 divines and then just roll Eldritch Implicits with the lesser until you have the baseline aura and the baseline hatred, and then call it a day, because that will save you a ton of money. But anyways, you could buy one off trade or make one with Necropolis, basically jack up the modifier rating, jack up the chance to get defense mod, lower the chance to get life and the other prefixes and stuff. You should hit a decent chest piece pretty quickly. As for the wands, number 1 is an aggressive wand, which if you have it fractured, you craft with the fossil combination of metallic, corroded, and shuddering. If the item level of the wand is 82 or lower, this is roughly about a 1 in 18 chance to give you a +2 minion wand, and outside of that, you might have to annul to clear 1 suffix. That is how you do this. If it's 83 or above, then you use a 4-socket resonator and you add in jagged, because the 83 or above adds in a flat chaos roll that's problematic, in which case you need jagged to disable chaos from rolling, and then it's a 1 in 12 if you do that. Now, that's how you craft the wand here, and you, of course, once you hit the mod you want, you have to annul to open up a suffix if you want to craft on like crit chance like I did, or maybe you hit crit chance randomly during the rolling process, which I believe is possible. All right, outside of that, the other wand, you'll notice I have a double minion damage, double minion crit multi-fracture. What I'd recommend if you want to craft wands like these is you go for, I think it was like 700-800 minion rating. You're gonna have to check PODB to make sure in terms of what guarantees T1% minion damage. But you jack up the modifier rating, you get a bunch of increased minion modifier chance, you reduce elemental, you reduce attack, you reduce caster, you reduce all these extra things, and then you do a quad fracture and you split once. What this does is it'll give you 2 wands that have double fractures. So for example, I did this and I hit this fracture, and not only did I hit this fracture, I hit about 7 other double fractures for good mods that I could do to make my minion wand, and I sold the extras. As for what you do to craft this, once you hit these double fractures, is you do the quad resonator, because most likely you're going to get an 84 wand, because most corpses are like 80 plus, which results in you having an 84 wand. You need to do the quad resonator I mentioned before, which is jagged, corroded, shuddering, metallic. those 4 fossils. Basically, the way it works is they're disabling every other mod but the +2 from occurring, and essentially, it's a 1 in 12 to hit a 6 mod item. So that's why it's a 1 in 12 for you to get the +2, because once you roll the 6 mod item, it is guaranteed to hit the +1 all, because there's no other affix that can occur with those 4 resonator mods. You're disabling all the other possible affix outcomes. Anyways, that's how you craft the wands. That's how you craft the chest piece, the boots, and the rings. I wish you all the best of luck. Oh, one more thing. If you're crafting the jewel, I would go for a fracture of either all res, flat ES, 35 effect, attack and cast speed. Any of those will work. And then you're going to do something like a reforged caster, which can give you about a 1 in 5 to hit the 3% minion attack and cast speed. You can do that a bunch of times till you hit. Or you can do a I think there's a fossil combination that makes sense. Ideally, I just like the idea of doing a reforged caster, but there's probably another reforge. Like you could do probably reforged chaos to force chaos res, but I'm not sure if there might be a, can't remember if there's a chaos modifier outside of chaos res. There might be a notable that has a chaos tag. I'm not 100% sure, but I'd recommend the reforged caster to hit the minion attack and cast speed and just reroll that until you hit effect, essentially, depending on what your fracture is that you fractured on your jewel. All right. Anyways, that is the Crab Lord. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making this character. Maybe it gave you some ideas for your own minion build. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out.